God is at work, nudging us, reminding us, tugging at us to be aware, to be sensitive. And sometimes it shocks me, it surprises me, and I know it's true. Yesterday morning was Saturday morning, and it was a beautiful morning, very nice day. An individual had been on my mind off and on during the week, and the name kept coming back to me. And yesterday morning, her name came back pretty strong. And I said, I'm going to pick up the phone and call. And I did. This happened to be someone who lives in the community, and I had done her husband's funeral about 2 months ago, and I have, checked in now and then to see how things are going. And I knew that it was a hard transition, a hard adjustment time for her. What I did not know is that yesterday was the day that her husband's ashes were being interred far, far away from here, and she, being older and frail, could not be there. I had no way of knowing that. I pick up the phone at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and we're talking on the phone, and she says to me, it's going to be a hard day today. And I said, oh, why is that? Is there something special? And she said yes, and explained that her children were burying their dad's ashes today, and she could not be there. And I said, you know what? Let's have a sandwich together. And so that's what we did. We had a sandwich together, and we talked for a while in the middle of the day. I had no plan to do that, but for some reason, her name kept tripping across the front of my brain. And how many times does that happen to us? And we are in the process of doing something else, or we think, my list is a mile long, I've got to address this. But how else is God going to speak or encourage unless this message is streaming across the front of our brain? It's a little bit like the trailer that goes across the CNN screen or the Fox News screen. There is a little stream of thinking, of thoughts, of ideas, of suggestions that occurs. And I have learned over the years, even though it might mean that I am totally going to change my plan for the morning or for the day or for the moment, to pay attention. And I'm so very glad I did. This takes us in a way to this interesting story in the gospel today, which is an accidental story as well. It's not something that was planned or in anybody's calendar. It just unfolded. Zacchaeus had heard about Jesus. He understood some things about the man. He was obviously very curious. And then he hears that Jesus is going to be walking down the main street in Jericho that very day. In fact, he can kind of see the crowd coming a little later in the day, and he decides to rush ahead. The gospel says that being short of stature, and it's fascinating, in preparing for this morning, I read two Greek scholars' reread of the passage, and they said, are we sure it was Zacchaeus who was short of stature, or was it Jesus who was short of stature? And so Zacchaeus wanted to be up high to see Jesus. It was an interesting question that I had never heard posed before. But that's a bit of trivia for you to use some point. Zacchaeus is in a tree. Odd place to be, and inevitably, if you're hanging out on a tree limb and you're walking down a street, if you were walking down Main Street and somebody was sitting in one of the tree limbs out there, you'd be likely to notice that person. And Jesus does. Jesus says, Zacchaeus, I would like to come to your house today. And so the accidental meeting, the moment unfolds, and Zacchaeus begins to talk about his life and what he does. Zacchaeus is a chief tax collector. That means he presides over all the district tax collectors, and tax collectors have a very good life and are fairly affluent. And being the chief tax collector, Zacchaeus is especially affluent, and he's also probably especially susceptible to the accusation of being a bit of a thief, because tax collectors in those days gathered all the taxes they could and kept as much as they could, passing some of it on to the government. Anyway, the story unfolds. Zacchaeus talks about his life, and there's an edge in his life. Within the past month, a middle-aged fellow came to see me in my study and to talk about his life. I would say early to mid-40s. I'd never met him before. I did not know him at all. And he had arrived at a point. There's something about early to mid-40s. Some of us might call it midlife crisis. But midlife crisis can happen early to mid-50s or early to mid-60s. It's whenever it happens. And he said, I know you don't know me. I know you don't know anything about me. And in a way, that's why I need to talk to you, because I need to tell you some things about my life that I don't feel comfortable telling anybody else. I would never tell my family, I'd never tell my friends, because I've got to be really strong and self-confident for them. But I know I can talk here. And he talked about 3 crossroads in his life. 3 crossroads. And I would call them serious edges. Sharp, difficult places that never really got processed or dealt with. One was his first marriage, and everything about it that went wrong, and his regret at not being able to make that work, and the edge of being a failure that he had never been able to shake. The second was a career decision along the way to close a business. And this career decision along the way might have made sense at the time, but it was kind of a toss-up as to what to do. And he was exhausted, worn out, drained, burned out, and just wanted to turn his back and walk away. He didn't want to hang in. And so he walked away. And all these years later, this edge is still there. I think I made the wrong